Around 400 AD, a man named Augustine experiences an event that was very traumatic for him. As a teenager, him and his friends break into someone's garden, and he steals a pear. Most of you are probably thinking, what's the big deal? But it was a really big deal to Augustine, because as he writes in his confessions, he didn't want the pear, and he wasn't even concerned with impressing his friends. He said that he stole the pear because he just wanted to do evil. He was doing evil purely for evil's sake, and he couldn't understand why he had this drive within him. Augustine begins traveling around the world. He starts to read a lot of Plotinus, and he has a mystical experience of the One. And then it falls away from him and he can never get back to it. Even though he wants to make this ascension Plotinus spoke of, there is something else within him, dragging him down. He begins to fall into deep despair, as he feels this drive to ascension is never going to be realized. Augustine then begins reading the New Testament, and he becomes Christian. He reads the words of St. Paul, who was once Saul, a Jewish man living in the Roman Empire, where he was persecuting the Christians whom he saw as a threat to the Jewish way of life. Then he has a revelatory experience, where he sees Jesus, converts to Christianity, and changes his name to Paul. He feels he has gone through a process of being born again. The way Paul interprets this change is that he has this inner conflict between the old ways and the old stories of his Jewish heritage and the stories of the New Testament. Paul understands the conflict within himself as the same conflict between these two cultures. He even goes on to believe that God is caught in this same conflict. He feels God is caught between these two sides of himself, between the God of the Old Testament, who is often jealous and vengeful, and the God of the New Testament, who is all-loving. God feels that he should uphold justice, law, and order, that his followers have strayed from the path and should be punished. Then there is another part of God that is all-loving and wants to forgive and redeem humanity. Jesus represents how God is supposed to have solved this conflict, that he killed his own son as justice for humanity's sins, but through this act, humanity was redeemed. If you remember back in video 2, we discussed the worldview that emerged in ancient Israel. This was the idea that by gaining an ability to understand the crucial turning points of history, we would be capable of orienting ourselves in the world so that our actions can bring about a better future. What Paul introduces to this narrative unfolding of history is a merging with the idea of overcoming our inner conflict, which we saw in ancient Greece. Paul wants to do the right thing, but he keeps doing the bad. It's like a civil war within his nature, and the only thing that can solve that war, for him, is Jesus. Christianity takes the resurrection of Jesus and makes the claim that it is the crucial moment, the fundamental turning point of history. If we can see and understand this moment properly, then we can make the right choices to bring about paradise. What is it about the Christian worldview that had this transformative effect on Paul? In order to address this, we will need to look at the Christian conception of love. Words can be very complex and deceptive. You can say, I love cookies, but you can also say, I love you to your child. And we obviously mean very different things when we say this. The Greeks gave us some very interesting ideas about the different forms of love. There is eros, or erotic love. This is more than just a sexual desire. It is a consumatory kind of love, a desire to be one with something. I want to consume the cookie and make it one with me. Then there is philia. This is the love of friendship. What makes someone a good friend is reciprocity. You give friendship, love, and compassion to them, and they return the favor. When the relationship is no longer reciprocal, even if you still love them, that is typically the end of your friendship. Then there is the idea of agape. This is a very different form of love. It is a universal, unconditional love that transcends and persists regardless of circumstance. It is the love a parent feels for a child, especially a newborn child. They bring this blob home from the hospital, which has no features of a person. It can't think. It has no capacity for moral action. It can't even hold up its own head. And if you love and care for this blob, they turn into a person. You don't love a child to get anything from them. It is not reciprocal like the love for a friend. Agape is the creative, narrative unfolding of love. You love the child precisely because that love creates a person. The practice of agape is an opening up and seeing through the prejudices we have about other people. And it was a completely revolutionary idea in the Roman world. The lepers, the barbarians, the slaves, all of the non-people could now be taken and integrated back into society. Augustine sees how all these ideas link perfectly together. He takes Aristotle's idea of a world that is acting on purpose and says this purpose is the resolution of God's inner conflict and the resolution of our own conflict. He concludes that this is the ultimate fulfillment the universe is trying to reach. The universe is acting on purpose because of this grand narrative that is trying to resolve conflict and gain inner peace. Augustine says that what is driving this ascension is a love for what is most real. He felt that love is at the heart of reason. We can see again that love and reason, spirituality and rationality are not opposed to each other. He takes on this Aristotelian idea and says that love is the desire to know things by becoming intimately one with them, to live in a skillful manner, to make the good choices that shape history, is to love other human beings in an agape fashion. It is the type of love that makes a person, communities of persons, and to live a meaningful life is to be involved with that process in some way.